Schaefer is a candidate in the MFA program at San Francisco State University. She lives in San Rafael and is currently working on 2 collections of stories: Her Father's Memoirs, about a family coming to terms with her father's mental illness and subsequent death, and Hope, about the citizens of a small town in Alaska. You can read her first publication, The Table, forthcoming later this year in the Barge Journal. Please welcome Summer.
This piece is being published in 11/11 in July, and it's only 10 minutes, so I'm not reading the whole thing. This takes place in the middle of the story, and it's basically a breakdown of the narrator. Her father died 6 months ago, but he's come back and he's living in the shed by the side of her house. When we hike with little time, we head out into the hills behind the wooden fence we put up around the yard last year to keep the deer from devouring the rose bushes. Robert puts Caleb into the pack. He remains remarkably content up there for the longest time. Periodically, we pass his sippy cup back with water inside. He drinks from it at the exact same time that Robert drinks from our water bottle. I took a photo of that once. There's a deer, or more likely coyote path, that starts at the base of the closest hill directly behind us. Occasionally, someone will see a wildcat and report it to the local newspaper. There are always deer, often wild turkey. The coyotes are eerily noisy at night, or sometimes not. Sometimes it's the middle of the day, though rarely, like the time I was reading in the living room and looked up to see a coyote looking directly at me, 20 feet away from in the middle of the lawn. Its head low, eyes on me, piercing me over the length of its long, narrow nose. It felt like some kind of message, but who knows what. It's one of those days that a person could live for, even if everything else were falling apart. There's a warm breeze that smells like spring, which maybe is moist soil and burgeoning blossoms and new grasses. There's something inspiring about a breeze like that, as if it somehow contained within itself all the goodness in the world. And the hills are green for the only 3 months they'll be green all year, covered by wildflowers with tiny blossoms and long stems. I go into photo mode. Snap. There's the hill covered in grasses. Snap. There are the grasses' golden seeds hanging towards the earth. My camera can also capture the smell of the grasses and the sound of them swishing in the breeze. Snap. There's the bowl of early morning shadows between the stocky trees in one of the hill's minor indentations. Snap. There's the soft, human-like contour of the hill's ridgeline. When I think about death, about this all going away forever, it hits me like the presence of absolutely nothing. Snap, snap. If one were to assume the absence of a heaven, then one would have to assume the finality of these moments, how they pass, and then vanish. I have the lead, and because Robert and I are both fast hikers, even with Caleb, halfway up the hill I'm breathing hard and feeling the sweat on my back. I feel the rocks and dirt of the trail under my shoes, listen to their crunch, sigh. It's not long, though, before I see someone coming our way down the hill with a big brown dog leading. She has a walking pole and a slight limp. It's Terry. I suspect my body may be clenching in upon itself, but there's no way to know, except that my brain has descended inwards, away from the breeze and wildflowers and green hill, and the light blue sky that gives the hills their unbelievable relief. Terry is our next-door neighbor, a single woman who is an OR nurse at the local Kaiser. She has never liked me, not from the first day we moved in, and I watched her driving into her garage, and she looked at me long and hard and didn't return my smile as I tried to balance a box against my knee in order to raise a hand, to wave. And I confess I think about it daily, wonder if it was that we have political stickers on both cars, and then put up a sign in the front yard during the presidential election, or the fact that we repainted the shutters magenta, or planted a large lemon tree in the back, which maybe could have offended somehow, because the lemons are ubiquitous and sometimes send up smells of lovely citrus rot when I forget to collect them all from the ground. Or it's Kayla, who cries long and hard many times during the day, and she thinks I'm doing something awful to him inside. I had myself so convinced about the political thing, and the shutters, and the lemon tree, and Kayla, when in reality it very well could have been the way I looked holding that box. I reminded her of someone else, or acted too friendly. That it seemed like just a matter of time before I would see her, late one evening when I was taking out the garbage, take a bag full of her dog's poop, and in the shadows of the new fence line between our yards, dump it quickly and quietly into our yard. I had stopped breathing even, because I didn't want her to see me seeing her. The first thought that had crossed my mind was how embarrassed she would be knowing that I had seen her. It seemed like too much for the both of us. Yet still I confided in Robert, who looked both bored and confused by the whole thing. He wondered, had I said anything to her previously? Anything that could have offended her? Was I sure that's what I'd seen? It wasn't until the following morning that I found the poop, 3 large ones grown soft overnight. And instead of scooping them into the bag and putting them into our garbage can as Robert would have done, I left the bag on her doorstep and scurried away, though I imagined ringing her doorbell and shoving the bag into her mouth. By the end of the day, I realized how impetuously I had acted, how stupid. Couldn't understand why, and I would never tell Robert again. These days, I'm not as sexual as Robert would like. I fall into bed and want sleep more than anything. Sometimes I open a book and hope he doesn't feel upset. Later, and even now, I let the poop come when it does. Once a week, a few times a month. I check for it before work in the morning. I make sure it never stays for longer than a night. Most nights I feel compelled by a sense of sacrificial duty. Some nights I pick up the poop and squeeze the bag powerfully between my fingers. Terry is coming quickly down the hill. She moves surprisingly fast, even with her limp and walking stick. She walks a lot. She is blonde going gray and is slender. I feel my stomach twitter and my pulse surge ahead as if it alone were willing to meet her head on. It is clear that one of us will have to let the other pass, and Terry is moving quickly. I wish now that Robert were leading and wonder if I can fake it, keep my eyes down and pretend not to see her, hear the scuff of her tread and the whooshing breathing of her dog. But then suddenly she is there. And to my right is this side of the hill solitary tree that is bent and looped, leaning sideways from base of trunk to clump of branches on top that give it the appearance of a slanted head. I look up and can't swallow, feel like I'm breathing much too hard, too loudly. Her eyes are blue, almost silver, and when she looks at me, I can't quite smile, though mean to. Hi is still lodged in my brain, though it feels like I may have said it. I fall into the tree just as she passes. My elbow hits first, and as I fall, it scrapes against the trunk, as if it were tracing the contours of its bark, committing it to physical memory. I put a foot in front to get my balance, but it lands on a root and slides to the side with a sharp pain. For a moment, I wonder if anything is broken. I think to move my ankle, and it moves. Robert is kneeling next to me then, Caleb peering over his shoulder, the blood draining into his round face. I feel Robert's breath on my neck and terrified that Caleb will fall out of his pack if he is thrust over so far. I feel the trickle of something coursing down my forearm and turn to the raw and bloody scrape that starts at my elbow and descends to the other side of my wrist. Are you okay? Robert's voice is quiet and calm. Others might consider it unconcerned, but most of the time I know better. I hear another voice. Is she okay? And it's Terry's. Must be, though I've never heard it before. Yeah, I think. Robert turns to her and then she seems to go. Can you move your ankle? He takes my ankle and gently moves it side to side all around. When he moves it to the left, the pain ceases and my eyes squint. I discover my breath now, which is coming through me like a torrent, and I'm shivering, suddenly cold. I want to cry, but nothing comes. I slowly bend over to touch it. My fingertips skim the surface of my socks as if my ankle were a bomb that might go off. When he sees the scrape on my arm, he wants to go back down. Okay, that needs to be taken care of, he says. Suddenly, it's all so hilarious. Robert looks at me askance, eyebrows creased, a thick wrinkle in the middle, but starts chuckling too. Are you all right? He asks. Yeah, I keep on laughing. I feel water sliding down my cheeks. I'm utterly ridiculous. Who could possibly love you? I ask myself. I stop laughing as quickly as I start. In fact, I can't be certain I was laughing, and in its place I feel a mounting energy, an urge to hurt someone. I'm still on the ground next to the hill's solitary tree, bent and filed by the crazy wind over all the years. I hear the grasses so much clearer from this level, how they swish and sigh and click in the breeze. There's a little black spider running for all its might across the boulders, little bits of dried dirt nearly, of its path in the opposite direction. I look up and Robert is holding his hand to me. He wants us to go back, but why would we go now? The top is the main reason to hike the hill, to see the view from there. And Caleb, look how happy he seems to be. The bleeding isn't bad. Once the pain from the sprained ankle subsides into a minor throb, I ignore Robert's outstretched hand and jump up on my own. I force myself not to look back at Terry. I have to hold my neck absolutely still to do so. I walk on my toes until my ankle feels good enough for the whole foot to come down, and then start limping. The path is too narrow for both of us to walk side by side, so Robert and Caleb walk off to the side in the grasses to be there if I need him. There are ticks in there, I say. I know, he says. Did she trip me? I stop and look at him, release the muscles of my neck. Who? He asks. Terry, our neighbor, that woman. I think she tripped me. Why would she do that? He says. I move faster and he follows, moving out of the tiki grass. If things were better, we would hike along the ridge, but the view from the top of the path is so great there's no reason to go any further. When we get there, I finally look down and watch Terry limping like a troll along with her dog, who in comparison seems to me then to be as a god himself. The love I have for her dog seems to radiate from me. When I hold my fingers close to the surface of my skin, I feel it there, all that love. From here you can see clear out to the bay, and as you can on nice days, even into San Francisco. From here you can see the hills of Marin roll up and down and into and onto each other. On one side down to Fairfax and Westmoreland, and eventually into the ocean. On the other side to the neighborhoods of Terrebonne and San Rafael. There's Highway 101, and past that the salty mudflats of the estuaries of China Camp. There's Frank Lloyd Wright's ridiculous pagoda-like spire piercing the scene from near the dome of the Civic Center. Beyond that, the industries of the East Bay and the long, snaking line of the Richmond Bridge that seems to ride the air like a massive magic trick. Out of the corner of my eye, there's something. It's Father. He's farther out on the hill along the ridge, and the breeze is just enough to stir the air. He's been able to grow back to the way it was decades ago, to the way I saw it this morning. He's in his cutoffs and Manassas t-shirt. It's chilly in the breeze, but he always ran hot. The view from here, I want to yell to him, is something else. He's looking the other way. I turn and start running along the ridge towards him as fast as my ankle will let me. I'm running surprisingly fast for the pain, and the wind coursing against me enlightens the presence of the cut on the arm, feeling colder and fresher there. Father is getting closer, though he is still looking the other way, nothing else to move him except his hair. I wish I could be close enough and brave enough to look into his face again, feel the warmth from his wide torso, see the wrinkles feathering out from the corner of his close-set, tiny green eyes that are also my eyes, though not Caleb's. There were those few times a long time ago I knew what it was like to feel the heat from the barrel of his chest in a hug or play tumble, or later the touch of an alcohol-infused pat. As I run, though, I became aware of something else. A growl rumbling at the base of my throat, a snarl resonating in my sinuses, a swirl of heat. When my hands meet Father's back, I catch him off guard because it takes no effort at all to push him over the rocky edge, watch him buckle and fall off the rock he's perched on. His knees smack the ground, his hands come forward to stop his body, but they don't. His forehead hits a rock and his head flails back, neck bending acutely. He rolls loose-limbed down the hills until disappearing into a cluster of trees near the bottom, where I see his body bang up against the trunk and remain there, unmoving, on its side. Looking down for the moment, I realize how high I am on the ridge. I suck in the cool air and bring it deep into my lungs. It tastes just like pure cold water. It burns my lungs. When I turn around, Robert is looking at me, and at that moment raises up his hands, palms up, in a universal expression. For what? Caleb is crying. Even from this distance, I can see his red, scrunched up face. Thank you.